The mission of the Holocaust Center is to educate people of all ages and backgrounds about the Holocaust and about the dangers of intolerance and all forms of hatred.
I am a director of the Montreal Holocaust Museum.
But by far the most touching and compelling part of the exhibition is the Holocaust survivor testimony.
After 50 years, I managed to be able to speak about our adventures.
Today, you have a very special and unique opportunity because you get to hear the testimony of Walter Apsel. He's a Holocaust survivor and he's a true humanitarian. So it's my honor to welcome him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Did they wake you up early? Yes. Are you half asleep? No. As Nancy told you, I was born in Vienna, Austria. You know any famous Austrians? How about your new governor of California, Schwarzenegger? He was born in Austria. Then we have people that are a little less important, like Mozart, Dr. Freud, Sigmund Freud, Strauss, the Waltz King, and myself, of course.
I go and speak to children in schools, universities, churches, in order to bring the message of tolerance and respect.
In 1938, I was 13 years old.
And the life of a little Jewish boy changed dramatically.
The German army marched in, and we became part of Greater Germany.
Nein, meine Kameraden, kann es nicht anders sein und es wird auch nicht anders sein.
Can you imagine if tomorrow the United States say, well, Canada becomes our state number 51?
From one day to the next, I wasn't allowed to go to school. I wasn't allowed to go to a cinema, to a theater, to a swimming pool.
Even the benches in the parks were marked forbidden for Jews. That's where I made my first act of resistance, crossing the park. I kind of risked half a behind and half a second, and I sat down on the forbidden bench. And I said, that's it. I sat on your bench. Nobody arrested me. That was my first act of resistance in 1938.
Luckily, my dad encountered one of his friends on the street, and he said,
this is crazy. This can't last, really. Why don't you try to get out of here?
Maybe this can last a month or two.
And whenever this situation with the Nazis is over, you can come back. And by kind of a miracle, we obtained a visa for Belgium. A visa is not only a credit card, it's a permit to enter another country.
And we left everything, our apartment.
My dad had a little business making leather goods like belts. We just closed the door, and with a little suitcase, we went to Belgium. In Belgium, of course, we had no money because we were only allowed to take 10 marks a person out of the country, which was about $5 a piece, $5 a piece. So we arrived in Belgium more or less penniless.
We managed to rent an apartment and kind of struggle.
I lived in Belgium for 13 years without ever obtaining the Belgian nationality, even though I was adopted by a Belgian eventually. The trouble was that in 1939, Germany declared war on Poland, and the British and the French declared a war on the Germans. And in 1940, Germany attacked Belgium, Holland, and France.
The Belgian army fought for about 18 days.
After that day, the King Leopold said it's useless, they're too strong for us, and we were again under the domination of the Germans. For about 2 years, the Germans really didn't bother with the Jews in Belgium. They were busy invading Russia, and they had other problems. After that, they tried to educate the Belgians that we were bad people and they should arrest us. I was about 16 when we saw a poster that showed the Jewish conspiracy over Europe with a big fat British Jew shaking hands with an ugly Russian Jew, and you had an ugly face like a devil in the center. We saw that poster. That poster was trying to educate the Belgians.
And my sister and I, my dad posted us in front of that poster, and you saw those two young, innocent kids in front of this ugly poster. We found it so ridiculous. As a matter of fact, the Belgian resistance already tore part of the poster and stuck another V for victory next to it. So not only we had the reaction that this was ridiculous, but the Belgian resistance also knew that this was fake and this was exaggerated. The Queen Elizabeth of Belgium and King Leopold, they were absolutely adamant for the Belgian police not to do that.
Compared to the French who in Paris, they said we want 40,000 Jews, and the Vichy police themselves arrested the Jews of Paris.
They only got 16,000. They parked them in what was called le Vélodrome d'hiver, that's a sports arena. And they left them there for about a week without food, without water.
They separated the men from the women.
And they sent them to Auschwitz via Drancy, the assembly camp outside of Paris.
Then they separated the women from their children. And the French were left with about 3,000 little kids by themselves,
which they parked in a concentration camp south of Paris that's called Pithiviers. And the French asked the Germans, what's with those kids? Could you not take those too? They said, no, we need permit from Berlin. Don't ask me why.
Again, they asked, how about those kids?
Eventually, the children were allowed to be stuffed into cattle cars, and they went straight to Auschwitz into the gas. After this was known in France, you had like a reaction, the small clergy, the priests in the villages, they started helping Jews. There's a village east of Lyon called Le Jambon. In that village of 5,000 Huguenots.
The Huguenots were killed in France by the Catholic rulers of France in those days.
And they remembered what happened to their ancestors. And they said, we are 5,000, we want to save 5,000 Jews.
And that's exactly what they did. Any Jew that reached that little village was saved.
Imagine if the rest of the population of Europe would have acted like those people in Le Jambon. At one point in time, the Germans did not arrest Belgian Jews. They only arrested immigrants like ourselves. When they eventually run out of immigrants, they then, of course, arrested the Belgian Jews too. But we did not know that in 1942. And this, to obtain the Belgian nationality, would seem like a lifesaver. So how do you obtain this blessed nationality? Well, one way to do it, of course, if you had an unmarried female, if she could marry a Belgian, she automatically became Belgian. So we had two unmarried females on our hand. One was my sister, who was 15 years old, and the other one was my grandmother, who was 75. Where my dad found Monsieur Dubreux, I really don't know. He was a driver for the Belgian Red Cross. And he said, I marry anyone. Have you got some money for me? He needed money for the bars every Saturday, which he attended regularly. And he said, I marry anyone you want, and I will sign a paper that I will not exercise my conjugal rights, and I will divorce whenever you guys want. How much you gonna give me? And it took us about 3 months to find out that a girl of 15 was underage, and because at that point in time we were German subjects, Austria didn't exist anymore, we needed a special permit from Berlin to have my sister marry anyone. By that time we had a paid-up groom on our hands. My grandmother married him, and she was the only one in our family that obtained the Belgian nationality, and she survived the war. Nobody bothered her. We then tried to obtain the Belgian nationality for me. I was adopted by a Belgian. She was very nice. She didn't ask for any money. She wanted to do it to help us. So I was officially adopted. My name was changed. The Belgian law says that if you lived long enough in the country and if one of your parents was a Belgian, you could apply for the nationality. And an adoptive parent is equal to a real parent. Well, this took a couple of years, but I never got it. And by the time this came about, the Belgian Jews were being arrested just the same, and the whole thing was for nothing.
When the Germans saw that the Belgians would not assist them in arresting us, they asked us to come to their high command and pick up the Star of David.
And I stood in line outside in order to obtain my Star of David.
You had to give them your address, and they gave you the Star of David.
Anybody walking the street with a newspaper or a book,
You knew he was hiding his star on the street.
2 weeks later, we got a convocation to come and report to the trains.
To go and work in Germany.
I have to admit that half the Jewish population in Belgium by themselves went to the trains. Now, of course, those trains did not bring them to Germany to work, but into concentration camps, and most of those people never came back.
But I can cite you the case of a young lady of about your age. She got this convocation first, and she figured if I don't go to the train, my parents might have a problem.
So the family brought her with her little suitcase to the train, and of course they wasn't to go and work in Germany, but it was to, she went straight to Auschwitz and she was never seen again. If you now didn't heed the call to go to the train,
Of course, you now broke the law and you could get arrested even though you wore your star. That's when we went into hiding. I don't know if you know the story of Anne Frank. Just like Anne Frank, we rented a store with the shutters closed. My friend from school, his mother had a wool shop, and through her wool shop, we went into the other store. She had rented it for us, claiming that she needed more space for her merchandise. And for 1 year, we lived behind the closed shutters of a store.
that went fine. But after 1 year, the landlord of the building found out that somebody was hiding on his premises, and he would not prolong the lease.